writing these down as you said them. You said united under love of country / nation. The wall was the most divisive thing. It even divided Republicans.
They can be, and policy on the national level can be divisive, like the coronavirus. Right now, you pushing vaccines pretty hard. That's a pretty divisive policy, but most certainly it's a nationalistic policy, and there's a lot of nationalistic propaganda around it, isn't there?
In this video, Andrew Wilson and his wife go head-to-head with woke Destiny and some other dude. The topic of debate between Andrew Wilson and Destiny in this clip is nationalism. With that, let's watch Andrew Wilson wreck woke idiot Destiny's feeling-based arguments with facts.
A nationalistic government. The idea that this could happen. I mean, that was the reason why we need to have a government that promotes "quote unquote" American nationalism. And I know while you're apparently not talking about a monoculture, I mean, if you're talking about a government that promotes "quote unquote" nationalism, then presumably you're talking about a government that promotes certain policies designed to get more people behind a common set of experience and belief, which seems like the opposite thing you'd want to do if you'd want to preserve unity in a diverse continental-sized country.
Why? Why is that contrary? That makes no sense.
Because under our framework, this goes back to Federalist number 10, where Hamilton said, look, democracy in a big republic can work because all of these different interests can keep each other in check. Everybody has the opportunity to put their policy into practice, to have the ability to sort of have a corner of this great country where they can be themselves, as far as possible under our constitutional framework. Well, I mean, but the idea of trying to squeeze everybody into a narrower box.
Way to cherry pick federalism. But the thing is, Bastiat, is look, we all live under one federal government.
Right.
Everybody does. There's no particularly good reason why you can't promote nationalism, or the federal government cannot promote nationalism and make a strong state. There's no good reason why they can't do that. There's no good reason why they shouldn't do that.
I don't think either of us disagree.
What is nationalism and a strong state to you? Because, I mean, the United States government is a pretty strong state.
How many times do you want this redefined?
If you like watching videos like this one, like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video.
Wait. First of all, the first definition was a little bit unclear, which is fine. But so more concretely, I think what we would ask is what's an example of a nationalistic policy?
A nationalistic policy at the federal government level. Maybe you could look at infrastructure might be a nationalistic policy. You could look at maybe different economic incentives via taxation, things like that could be nationalistic policies. There's
basically the entire Trump and Pat Buchanan America First agenda. Yeah, those were both attempts to unite the different factions of the republic under a banner of nationalism. It's the way you overcome all of the racial differences and religious differences. It's the reason you can have a country with freedom of religion, with multiple cultures, with multiple races, because you can unite them under love of country and love of your nation. It doesn't, like he said, those two aren't mutually exclusive.
So I don't think Jefferson said, we're all Republicans, we're all Federalists.
So I don't think either of us would disagree with either of that. But the weird thing, though, is that everything you're giving me is 100% not the Trump agenda and absolutely the Biden agenda. So when we look at, for instance, infrastructure, that's what.
So, yeah, I don't understand why the dude that's debating with Destiny thinks that nationalism and a multicultural state have to be mutually exclusive. That makes no sense to me. Anyone who lives here, regardless of your culture, your ethnicity, you can love the country that you live in and have pride in it if you want, without abandoning your culture or your family's history or traditions. So I don't understand why they'd be mutually exclusive. And frankly, I don't know why America First or nationalism as a concept is even debatable. Now, I will say in these other countries around the world, it is easier to promote nationalism because they are not as multicultural as the United States. We are the most multicultural in the world, I believe, and that is a good thing, I think, but it increases the difficulty of uniting everyone under nationalistic policies because, again, everyone has different ideas about traditions, customs, ways of doing things, whereas if you're in, I don't know, Japan, Italy, Sweden, it's insanely homogenous. So that's one hurdle, a major hurdle that they don't have to get over when they're promoting nationalistic policies. Anyway, let's see where the rest of this goes.
What's working its way through Congress right now. There's a question of if any Republicans are going to be on board with that, the massive infrastructure. But when you talk about economic incentives, that's baked into the last coronavirus relief and potentially like the new infrastructure bill going forward. Like that's economic incentives that Biden has for working class families. When you talk about attempts to unite the Republic, if you look at Biden's rhetoric, he's not a Republican or a Democratic president. He's the president of the entire United States. He's the president of every American. When you talk about a country with religious freedom, Trump is the one that's holding up the Bible and saying, this is my holy book. This is one of the best books ever written. I think it's my first favorite or second favorite behind my book or whatever, right? It feels like everything you're giving me right now is like 100%
None of
Biden's
that has
rhetoric.
anything to do with anything. Who cares if Biden has what you consider portions of a nationalistic agenda? Good. He also has portions of things that are not a nationalistic agenda, like what you guys consider open border immigration.
Well, what part of Trump? What part of Trump
wants to move in?
What part of Trump was considered a nationalistic agenda? Was it the massive tax cuts for wealthy corporations?
How's this for a massive infrastructure project? The wall. That would have been a very highly nationalistic project. That's just one example.
Hold on,
many.
You're a
leveled country here.
You're a real life.
Nothing of the sort.
Just because Andrew used infrastructure as a way to unite a country, as an example of nationalistic policies, it doesn't mean that Biden's bill necessarily represents what he's talking about. And as far as Donald Trump holding up the Bible, this is the United States, and we were founded on Judeo-Christian principles. I'm sorry. And the further we've gotten away from those, I don't know if there's any clear data about this, but I believe that the increase of many of the United States social ills directly correlates with citizens moving away from Judeo-Christian principles. If we move to multiple other countries that are more homogenous, most of them probably have a religious text that the majority of the country follows. And again, if someone comes into our country, they don't need to abandon their culture or certainly not their religion. They have freedom on all those things, but they will have to accept that this country was based on Judeo-Christian values, and the Bible, if we're doing it correctly, should be, at least the principles of the Bible, should be a uniting factor for the country. And I don't know how Destiny and his little buddy there can possibly think that building a wall is not nationalistic, if not hyper-nationalistic. That's a great example Andrew gave. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
Go ahead.
Well, okay, I'm sorry. This is true for me. You're a real life person. You drive to work, okay?
Yeah.
I've driven all over this country for a long time, and I'm sorry, but the idea that investment of our infrastructure, as somebody that's driven on roads in the Midwest that are fucking falling apart, as somebody that wants to move to Miami where buildings are fucking collapsing, as somebody that is like watching flooding happening like around the world and shit, as somebody that is watching like the dramatic change in climate across the Northwest where they don't have air conditioners, because how are you telling me that a wall is the type of infrastructure investment that people across the country are looking forward to?
Whether you agree that the wall was a good idea or a bad idea is irrelevant. I was giving you an example of something that would be nationalistic. So when we're talking
hold on. We're asking you for examples. You can't give me an example, and then when I push back on why your example is dog shit, say, well, that's not relevant. It absolutely is relevant. You brought it up as an example.
Dog shit. What you're doing is saying, I don't agree with this example of nationalism, not saying that it's not an example of government nationalism.
Well, I've got two
presidents. One president is going to unite disparate people, though, not just something that 50% of the population is down with.
No, nationalistic
is going to unite the nation on a wide
people. That's just
scale.
bullshit, and he made it up. Nationalistic policy is not necessarily there to unite everybody.
Okay, you literally said, I'm writing these down. Hold on, I'm writing these down as you said them. You said united under love of country/nation. The wall was the most divisive that it even divided Republicans.
They can be, and policy on the national level can be divisive, like the coronavirus. Right now, you pushing vaccines pretty hard. That's a pretty divisive policy, but most certainly it's a nationalistic policy, and there's a lot of nationalistic propaganda around it, isn't there?
Yeah, Destiny and his buddy don't seem to understand. Just because they don't like the wall doesn't mean it's not nationalistic. It's about as nationalistic as you can get because you're putting your citizens first, the American citizens first. The open border under Biden is the ultimate non-nationalistic policy. I mean, just letting random people into the country not vetted, that's not putting Americans first. And I thought his example of the vaccine was a good one as far as something that is a nationalistic policy, but it is divisive. I think ideally nationalistic policies will unite people, but there can be detrimental nationalistic policies. That's why I say anything on the America First agenda is nationalistic, whether you like it or not. It's putting Americans first, and putting your citizens first, to me, is the ultimate in nationalism. But we want to hear from you. What do you think about this conversation between Andrew Wilson and Destiny around nationalism? Let us know. Anyway, as always, we really appreciate you watching, and we will see you on the next one.